Welcome back, my friends, for a series of talks on the spirituality of Saint Thérèse of the Child Jesus. The topic for our discussion today is the power of confidence. One of the most important aspects of the spirituality of Saint Thérèse is a concept of confidence. For Thérèse, confidence is where the human frailty meets the divine mercy. She came to realize quite early in life that the essence of being human is one's weakness, human finitude. The more she strives to reach perfection, the more she realizes that she is falling short of that perfection. The constant experience of her weakness on one side and the infinitude of her ideal of love on the other leads her to the keen sense of her own incompleteness. Saint Thérèse expresses it in one of her richest theological expressions. The more one advances in this way of perfection, the more one sees the goal is still far off. And now I am simply resigned to seeing myself always imperfect, and in this I find my joy. However, God has established in His wise providence that each one of us are to grow and make progress towards that degree of perfection to which we are created. Therefore, Thérèse does not give up. Rather, does everything that is in her power to be a useless servant. Nevertheless, she hopes that the good God will give her through His grace all that she desires. Because, as against her own fallibility and weakness, Thérèse knew that God alone is infinitely perfect. Shortly before her death, she expresses that she has never been able to do anything alone. And therefore, she does not lean on her strength and weakness. She leans rather on the strength of Him who on the cross has overcome the power of hell. Therefore, hopes that Jesus will give her this love, which is incapable of acquiring by her powers alone. And this hope spontaneously takes the form of a prayer, which is touching in its beauty. If we had the love of all hearts, this love would be yours. Oh well, give us this love. And again, oh, give me 1,000 hearts to love you, but that is still too little. Jesus, beauty supreme, give me your divine heart itself to love you. The greatest hope that Thérèse alludes is that God will make up for our deficiency. This hope comes because of two reasons. One, the strength of one's faith that in spite of my weakness, God will grant me what I desire. Second, God's fidelity and His benevolence, which contains with greater certainty of being granted than what she asks, which emerges from a more nuanced form of familiarity. What is that priority of mercy over confidence that we are talking about? It is in fact important to see how our vision of confidence emerges from the concept of divine mercy. First and foremost, Thérèse attributes priority of mercy over confidence. For human perfections alone cannot be the source of confidence. My incompleteness can only be the basis of my confidence only insofar as something other than my incompleteness provokes me and supported by another movement, a movement justified by the positive and attractive qualities of the one upon whom I count for my completion. It is in this sense we have to interpret the words of Thérèse when she says that her nothingness causes her joy. The observation of her nothingness brings her to the confidence in Him who loves to lower himself towards the misery that entrusts itself. And even if she is delighted to have the opportunity to progress in humility, she is especially delighted that, becoming more humble, her confidence will be more pure and strong. Thus, Thérèse draws her confidence from divine condescension as it deepest source. Close to his heart, we learn courage and especially confidence. This is a surety. The Lord is the rock to which I am raised. He teaches my hands to fight and my fingers to make war. He is my protector and I hope in him. Psalms 143, verse 1 and 2. The rock, sure, unshakable, of one piece, a symbol of fidelity. And Thérèse takes her stand upon it. The notion of confidence takes the central place in Saint Therese's spirituality. In the manuscript B, little Thérèse gives us the explanation of confidence through certain expressions such as the boldness of offering oneself as a victim of God's condescending, merciful love, the folly that God's love will accept her as a victim, the abandonment with total confidence to infinite mercy, the surrender of little child without fear in his father's arms, the blind hope that she has in his mercy, and the like expressions. All these Thérèse sums up in the expressions when she says, it is confidence and nothing but confidence that must lead us to love. In her correspondence, she insists on the same thing again. She writes to Leonie that perfection consists in taking hold of Jesus by his heart. For us who are living under the law of love, in order to profit by the loving advances that our spouse is making to us. To Father Roland, she writes, in order to reach perfection, it is sufficient to recognize one's nothingness and to abandon oneself as a child in God's arms. My way is all confidence and love. To Father Bellier, she writes, before the abysses of love and mercy of the heart of Jesus, one must act with a loving audacity, with an entirely filial confidence. To reach the treasures of Jesus' merciful love, one must follow the way of simple and loving confidence. To her sister Mary, she tells, as imperfect as we are, Jesus will transform us into flames of love, provided we hope for all from his goodness. To her novices she addresses, her apostolate was a constant preaching of confidence in God. And it is confidence in God that she insisted upon the most in her conferences of the novitiate. To be a child is to be humble and to expect everything from the good God. And when they finally ask her, what is the little way? She answers, it is the way of confidence and total abandonment. Confidence, my dear friends, is a bridge between reality and the ideal. For Thérèse, confidence bridges the gap between reality and the ideal. Or better, through confidence, Thérèse is able to invite God to work in her life. However, Thérèse is well aware that this bridge is never definitive. When God fills the gap a little in the heart of Thérèse, she moves on to a higher stage of love, and the drama continues indefinitely. The more Thérèse loves God, the more she wants to love him. The goal seems to move away as she approaches it. Confidence must make a new bridge every time. Thérèse understands perfectly well that the two perfections, that one of God, which can always be communicated further without ever being exhausted, and that of a human being, which consists, according to her masterly definition, in being what God wills us to be. Thérèse strongly believes that as long as she is living, she has not yet to reach that perfection. From an existential perspective, Thérèse would argue that God always wants us to be more than we actually are. Thus, our own present love can never be the road which unites to the ultimate love, to the ideal of perfection which she dreams of. Yes, it is love indeed which must reach its ideal of perfection, but the saint is condemned to always beg God for it. She will remain the saint of love and the saint of confidence always and at the same time. The little way is the only way of perfection she thought of on earth. And because it is a thought relative to the ideal, spiritual childhood is in the end a way of confidence. Desire and its future realization. The oscillating movement between the reality and the ideal is manifested for Thérèse with yet another feature of the doctrine on confidence, that is, that desire itself is a sign of a future realization. Thérèse formulates this thought through her sheer personal experience. She even goes to the extent of saying that all her desires have been fulfilled. The good God showed me the same mercy that he showed to King Solomon. He has not willed that I have one single desire which is not fulfilled. Not only my desires for perfection, but also those whose vanity I have understood without having experienced it. Again, he alone could fulfill my immense desires. And hours before her death, she says, even my littlest desires have been fulfilled. She recognizes that there on the part of God an immensity of love for her. It is undoubtedly the same intuition that makes her perceive in the desires not granted because they indeed exist a greater love and therefore a better fulfillment. Maybe swimming in the ocean is an excellent metaphor. The deeper you go into the ocean, the more expansive the ocean becomes, and the more expansive the ocean becomes, greater is your desire to swim further. Saint Thérèse exposes the interplay between the desire and its fulfillment further with the authority of the scriptures. She writes, through beautiful parables and often without even using this means which was so well known to the people, Jesus teaches us that it is enough to knock and the door will be opened, to seek in order to find, and to hold out one's hand humbly to receive what is asked for. He also says that everything we ask is Father in his name, he will grant. Texts such as these inspired in her this assurance. One is only to ask for it. However, Thérèse goes further in her theology of desire. She asserts that not only does God grant the desire, but it is he himself who inspires it. Taking her inspiration from St. John of the Cross, Thérèse made these words of the mystical doctor her own. The more God wishes to bestow on us, the more he makes us desire. In her act of offering, Thérèse expressly quotes this text with John chapter 16, verse 23. Several times, again, she repeats it. It is God who makes her desire. Both the desire and its realization are therefore pure gifts from God. He is the one who makes us desire and who grants our desires. Thérèse even goes to the extent of asserting that it's impossible that the desire inspired by God is not realized. This is another formulation of what we find in St. John of the Cross. This idea, which appears for the first time in her writings in 1891, greatly helped her in the search for and the conception of her little way. One finds it at the time of her more sensitive moments. First, at the time when she noticed that she was still far from holiness, without knowing how to remedy it. However, a solution had to exist because God cannot inspire unrealizable desires. Less than 1 year later, the same conviction is latent in her offering to merciful love. Feeling in her heart immense desires, it is with confidence that she invites God to take possession of her. In the month of September 1896, she offers the same argument to Mary, who fears being unable to follow the program of Manuscript B. God would not give you the desire to be possessed by Him, by His merciful love, if He were not reserving this favor for you. Or rather, He has already given it to you since you have given yourself to Him. Since you desire to be consumed by Him, and since God never gives desires that He cannot realize. It is important to understand two features of desire here. One, the one who conceives the desires has an extremely well-developed feeling about divine things. This makes her very insightful in discerning God's will. She senses that she is living in an atmosphere of great truth. It will therefore be rather difficult for her to imagine desires which are not likely to be fulfilled, for God illuminates her and assists her internally in her choice. Consequently, even back in 1894, she wrote, quoting St. Paul, "We do not know how to ask for anything as we ought, but the Spirit pleads within us with groanings that cannot be expressed in speech." We have then only to surrender our soul to abandon it to our great God. St. John of the Cross emphasized this secret elimination in the domain of desires conceived by saints. If the requested thing is not according to God's will, they do not have the strength to desire it intensely. In the book, The Science of Love, the study on the teaching of St. Thérèse of Lisieux, John Woo opines that her soul was like an extremely sensitive film that records even slightest moments of grace. Moreover, does not Thérèse's confession at the end of year 1895 go in the same direction? I can no longer ask for anything with fervor except the perfect accomplishment of God's will. Thus, she chooses her desires instinctively. Practically speaking, she no longer has anything but holy desires, which will be surely granted if the soul asks insistently for them. Second, he who answers finds himself before a very pure soul, desiring only His will. Such a soul possesses a great power of love over God. Thérèse betrays her own secret when she says that God showed her once again how pleased He is to grant the desires of souls who love Him alone. She follows a way of total confidence. But our question is, does confidence really work? Is Thérèse speaking the truth? At the end of our discussion, this is a practical question that would disturb many of the viewers. Does confidence really work? is a solution which Thérèse proposes to her own powerlessness and which consists in total confidence in God really fruit-bearing? Let us see what Saint Teresa has to say about it, and let us also analyze the theological foundations behind this great doctrine. First and foremost, the notion of confidence is primarily a personal experience of Thérèse herself. She not only conceived the way of confidence, but also has demonstrated its effectiveness by her life. Her heroic fidelity to the least signs of the divine will and her very great fraternal charity have demonstrated that God had indeed realized her hope and that he had led her to the summit of sanctity. The church has confirmed it. Thérèse herself recognized the great things that the Lord had done in her, and that the breath of the Spirit, which goes where it wills, had filled her with grace. Secondly, Thérèse is convinced that confidence will work. She takes her primary authority over the subject from St. John of the Cross, who said, "One obtains from God as much as one hopes for." She advises Mary of the Trinity, who was passing through a great difficulties concerning her vocation. Really keep your confidence. It is impossible that God will not respond to it, because he always measures his gifts according to our confidence. Earlier in 1891, she had written the same thing to Celine. Confidence works miracles. At the end of her life, Teresa would say, "It is impossible that all my great desires, about which I have so frequently spoken to the good God, will not be completely answered." Thirdly, the source of confidence is the condescension of God. Teresa is working entirely on the condescension of God, who does not allow himself to be outdone in generosity. And this faithfulness of God appears to her a delightful promise. To Mary of the Trinity, she explains that it was to misunderstand God's infinite goodness, to restrict her desires and expectations. My infinite desires are my riches, and for me, Jesus' word will be realized. For he said, "To those who have, more will be given, and they shall have in abundance." Again, she says that it was not necessary to fear desiring too much or asking too much of God. Here on earth, there are people who know how to ingratiate themselves into everyone's affection. They know how to obtain all they desire. So when we importune God for something he had not intended to give us, he is so powerful and so rich that it is a matter of honor for him not to refuse us, and he gives. One can understand why Thérèse was delighted by this passage from the book of Sirach. Trust in God and stay in your place, for it is easy for the Lord in an instant to make the poor man rich. The blessing of God hastens to reward the just, and in a swift hour his blessing bears fruit. Fourthly, confidence is entirely founded on divine magnificence. Speaking about the effects of confidence to Mary of the Trinity, Thérèse says, "One is happy to feel weak and miserable, because the more one recognizes it humbly, expecting everything gratuitously from God without any merit on our part, the more God lowers himself towards us to fill us with this gift of magnanimity." Comparing her young novice to a little child who does not even succeed in climbing the first step of the staircase, Thérèse instructs. Agree to be this little child. By the practice of all virtues, always lift your little foot to climb the staircase of holiness. You won't even manage to mount the first step. But the good God only asks for good intentions. Soon overcome by your useless efforts, He will come down Himself and taking you in His arms will carry you away forever in His kingdom. Elsewhere, she compared God to a giant who gives to the little child with only one arm what this little one is incapable of catching by itself. Finally, Thérèse teaches us the secrets of great saints on their way to holiness. Commenting on the parable of the workers of the 11th hour, a gospel passage that delighted her most, Thérèse says, "See, if we place all our confidence in God and constantly put forth our best efforts, while hoping for everything from His mercy and not from our miserable works, we too shall receive the reward of the greatest saints." It is even possible that littleness attracts God's attention more than the actions and the admirable writings of the saints. Commenting on the request made by the mother of the sons of Zebedee, she says, "I somehow feel that these special places, refused to the great saints and martyrs, are reserved for little children." Before we conclude, another essential Theresian doctrine which has to be emphasized is it is not essential to observe spiritual progress through one's external manifestations. In other words, one can be a great friend of God than one could presume, although externally, contrary is manifested. Thérèse here makes an excellent distinction between chronic moral infirmities and spiritual imperfections. A sister, let us say, with the faculty of displeasing her in everything and in her very disagreeable ways, words, and character, could be a holy religious who must be very pleasing to God. Speaking to Genevieve, she says, "On the last day, you will perhaps be astonished to see your sisters delivered from all their faults and imperfections and appear to you as great saints." She affirms further, very often what appears as negligence to our eyes is heroic in God's eyes. A sister who has a migraine or who suffers spiritually does more while accomplishing half of her task than another one, healthy of body and mind, who does it in its entirety. "It is a great trial to see everything on the black side," she wrote to Sister Martha. "But this does not depend on you completely. Do what you can." And concerning Sister Amy of Jesus, "The peel is rough, but I assure you that the fruit is excellent. The good God doesn't judge as we judge one another based on appearances." To Mary of the Trinity, there is answers. "And if the good God wants you weak and helpless like a child, do you believe that you will have less merit? Agree to stumble at every step, therefore, even to fall, to carry your cross weakly, to love your helplessness. Your soul will draw more profit from it than if carried by grace, you would accomplish with enthusiasm heroic actions that would fill your soul with personal satisfaction and pride." My dear friends, we live in a self-glorified world where success stories of the individuals with their strenuous efforts are the only hallmarks of greatness. Our greatness is manifested by the talents we have. Individual abilities we manifest, and the magnificent results we produce as the expressions of our greatness. Our intellectual abilities and what we can bring about with our personal efforts finally counts as our greatness. Spirituality becomes only a religious manifestation where God becomes an added tool of inspiration, and grace is what is understood to be an added divine energy in our pursuit of greatness. It is to this world there is a spiritual doctrine of confidence comes as a counter-cultural stance, a mirror to our unfounded shallow spirituality and psychologically induced prosperity cults. There is spiritual doctrine becomes a scanner in our pursuit of genuine holiness, the manifestation of divine mercy through condescension on one hand, and the surrender of our souls to that divine mercy with confidence to the acknowledgement of our own weakness and fallibility. Humility alone and not self-glorification can take us to the summit of love and holiness. God bless you all.